Towards Justice. Part 2. A Human Code of Morality. Number 1. Protect oneself and those for whom one is responsible from harm. Number 2. Do no harm. Author's note. Regarding a moral code, I personally like the admonition to love God with one's whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love others as oneself, since I have a very clear understanding of what I mean by God, love, and others. Stating a moral code using these terms would not be useful for people with different understandings of these words. The intent here is to propose principles that could be embraced by all people. Harm. Harm includes bodily damage, assault or forced invasion into any bodily orifice or organ, forced restriction of freedom of movement, restriction of the ability to contract or work for gain, stealing property, invasion of home or personal physical space, mental invasion such as mind control, indoctrination, eliminating or implanting memory, or implanting thought or emotion, including subliminal audio, visual, or electromagnetic material or signals, putting at risk of being harmed, or a threat to do harm. Harm does not include offending someone's pride, hurting someone's feelings, disagreeing with an opinion, idea, or philosophy, speaking or writing anything truthful that does not promote harm, speaking or writing an opinion, idea, or philosophy, destroying illusion, which causes painful emotions, failing to provide someone's preference or do what someone wants, or looks or gestures toward adults. Harm can be done by means of physical actions, words, thought, or willpower. Relative harm must be weighed. Children can be harmed by actions that would not harm adults, and stealing an amount from one person is less harmful than stealing a smaller amount from millions of people. Responsibility. One is responsible for one's actions, words, and thoughts and their effects. One is responsible in appropriate measure for oneself, one's children, one's spouse or family partners, whether legalized or not, one's adult children when they are frail or disabled, one's parents when they are frail or disabled, one's siblings when they are orphaned children, frail or disabled, one's property, including things, plants, animals, real property, and intellectual property, one's friends, neighbors, and local community, one's region and country, one's planet, and the human race. One must protect oneself as necessary first. Relative responsibility must be weighed. We have more responsibility for ourselves than for our siblings, more responsibility for our children than for our neighbor's children. One is not responsible for any condition or situation which one has no ability to change or affect. Where there is no benefit or ability, there can be no duty or responsibility. One is not responsible for the actions of other adults who act with their own volition. Compassion may be appropriate, but one is not responsible for the pain of adults and children to the extent that they are responsible, when that pain is a direct result of their choices. One is also not responsible for one's actions when one is controlled by another. When one is forced to act by physical force, legal force, or threat of harm, then the person or entity applying the force or threat is responsible for those actions and their effects. Part 3. Acting Morally. The Ten Commandments Revisited. Do not lie. It harms oneself, others, and society, even though that harm may not be immediately evident. Lying means speaking or writing something that one knows is untrue. Making a mistake is not lying. When one says or writes something that one later discovers was untrue, simply correct the error by speaking or writing the truth to those to whom it was communicated. One is not morally obligated to answer all questions or divulge all information to anyone who asks for it. Sometimes it is wise to be silent or change the focus. Respect or admire what is worthy of respect or admiration according to its degree. Do not respect or admire what is unworthy of respect. This is a type of lie. Disrespect only what is worthy of disrespect. Disrespecting something that is not worthy of disrespect is also a type of lie. The first consequence of lying is that one's own ability to discern the truth is obscured. Do not steal. Do not cheat. Do not extort. Do not exploit. This applies to physical property and intellectual property. This also applies to people's minds and senses. All forms of mind control or deceitful manipulation are immoral. Controlling another person to force them to act or not act, or to create against their own will, is one of the most serious and insidious acts of immorality. Preventing people from accessing truthful information to which they have a right is a type of stealing. People own the results of their actions and have the right to the results of their labor. Do not take advantage of another's weakness or adversity in negotiating an agreement. This is the opposite of presently common business practice. Do not accept material value from society without giving something of value, material or non-material, to society. This is a type of stealing as it exploits all members of society and is extortion when done by force. This is presently common economic practice. Conversely, a society or government should not give material value without receiving value, material or non-material. Charity must be reciprocated with gratitude, goodwill, and by complying with agreements, including laws. Do not break valid commitments. Notify other parties promptly when an emergency arises that prevents one from fulfilling a commitment. Request to renegotiate commitments in good time when desired. Any agreement based upon fraud or deceit is invalid, and anything based upon such an invalid agreement is also invalid. Do not encourage or assist others to break their commitments. Encourage others to communicate and renegotiate any commitments when necessary. Morality in societies. The laws of a community need to express the community's best current understanding of moral principles. Some actions that harm others need to be illegal and carry appropriate penalties. Other harmful actions cannot or need not be legislated. Harming oneself does not need to be illegal since the penalty is automatic. Morality and legality are not the same. Just because there is no law prohibiting an action does not mean the action is moral. Just because an action is immoral does not mean it should be illegal. Some actions are illegal even though they do no direct harm. Failing to obey a traffic law may not cause any direct injury, but it may inhibit safe, efficient movement of dangerous heavy machinery like cars and trucks, and it may result in extreme fear. Licensing requirements for surgeons exist in order to minimize risk of surgical tragedies. Some laws are within the scope of preventing harm to others. However, legislative power can be easily overstepped with either good intent or ill. No law or regulation restricting freedoms should exist unless there is a real need for it. No law or regulation should restrict thought or words, with the exception of words that slander or directly incite harm. Ideas and philosophies do no direct harm. Actions do harm. When actions prescribed by a particular idea or philosophy result in harm and people know the facts, they can reject that idea or philosophy. Government has the power of force and carries the greatest duty to use that power to benefit the governed. If that power is instead used to harm or restrict unnecessarily, society itself is harmed as well as individuals. All government workers must adhere strictly to moral principles in their government work. They set society's standards and set examples to the public and the young. Communities and societies have an obligation to restrict the freedoms of people who do harm. When a society fails to do so, harmful behavior increases, risk of harm to all members of the community increases, and the society itself weakens. When a society does harm by restricting the freedoms of people without just cause, risk of harm to all members of the community increases, and the society itself weakens. Exile from society and its benefits is necessary in cases where people either cannot or are unwilling to behave morally and respect the rights of others. Wise elders of indigenous peoples detected early parasitic predatory behavior and took steps to exile such individuals in order to protect their communities from destruction. Children are not born with empty souls or blank minds, and a few are born with an inclination toward predation rather than empathy and compassion. When someone can learn and transform, today's humane societies can provide wonderful opportunities to do so. But when someone cannot, exile is moral, compassionate, and necessary. Reference: Thomas Sheridan, author, artist, and researcher on psychopathy, discusses indigenous societies. Quote, "Psychopaths are extremely rare in indigenous communities. That's because they have an ongoing native wisdom towards them, and they'll often take them and kill them. I know this sounds very harsh. I'm not advocating that here. But what happens is, as soon as they identify a psychopath, they'll take him hunting one day, and he'll meet with an unfortunate accident, because in all these cultures, the thing is to save the tribe. So any one of these individuals in the tribe that's living on the edge like that is very difficult. The Inuits, for instance, in the Arctic region, the term that they use for a psychopath is literally translated as, 'He who stays behind and has sex with the women, our wives, and steals our stuff while we go hunting for our children.' See, so they have always been wise in the native people. If you look at the shamanic cultures, the shamans had the ability to kill, but also to heal, both, because they would practice. They actually knew that there was a certain individual within the community. If this thing actually grew up and, didn't change, chances were it was never going to change, what they called the soulless ones." Unquote. Until such time as all human beings have internalized moral principles that respect all others, laws and law enforcement are necessary. Laws need to include the reasons and circumstances for which they are written in order to facilitate correct application and diminish misapplication. Balance. Balancing the rights of all individuals to not be harmed leads to human progress as we refine our understanding and apply moral principles in better and better ways. It is not possible to guarantee morality or justice by means of any written code or adherence to any collection of documents. Balancing moral principles, degrees of harm, degrees of responsibility, personalities, and circumstances is artful, not mechanical. The greater the wisdom, the more precise the balance, and the more satisfying the outcome. Justice is something we feel palpably, as long as our ideas, desires, or fears do not interfere. The more often we experience justice, the quicker we are to detect it again and to create it ourselves.